Welcome to Mill History Talk, the podcast where we explore the past to better understand the profession of arms today. We dive into the campaigns, conflicts, issues, and commanders that have shaped military thinking across centuries, and why it all still matters. Whether you're an officer in training, a seasoned professional, a student of strategy, or simply curious about how history informs modern warfare, this space is for you. Our mission is simple: to foster insight, reflection, and critical thinking primarily through the lens of military history. Before we begin, a quick note. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the podcast writers, hosts, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency or organization. So, whether you're listening in a barracks, a lecture hall, at the gym, or in your car on the way to work, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've been with us for the past couple of parts, you know we've been digging into the massive shadow World War II cast over the U.S. Army. I mean, it shaped its identity, defined how it thought about war. It was foundational.
Absolutely. A defining moment, a template even.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting as we get into this final part. That influence, well, it's much more complex than just a success story. Some parts are still vital, foundational. Others, frankly, they've kind of hardened, become limiting, especially looking at the Army from, say, 2000 to 2025.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does it all mean for the Army today?
Well, what's fascinating here is exactly that tension you mentioned. Between 2000 and 2025, the Army's been wrestling with this really powerful, kind of multifaceted legacy. So our mission today really is to take a critical look at how WWII is still shaping doctrine, organization, culture, its whole way of war. We're trying to figure out, what's endured in a good way and what's actually become a bit of a hindrance now.
Makes sense. Let's kick off with doctrine. Some core principles trace right back to WWII, right? Like combined arms warfare.
Oh, absolutely. Forged right there on the battlefields, Europe, the Pacific.
Yeah, this idea of integrating infantry, armor, artillery, engineers, air power, making them all work together for, tactical synergy. The understanding was clear. No single piece wins alone. Armor needed infantry, infantry needed armor, everyone needed fire support and air cover.
And that didn't stop in 45.
No, it flowed right into the Cold War, got really sophisticated by the 80s with air-land battle doctrine. That whole concept designed to fight outnumbered against the Soviets, emphasizing speed, deep strikes, coordination.
Right.
And then there's mission command, another huge one from WWII lessons.
Inspired by the German Auftragstactic.
Exactly. Decentralized execution, trust, commander's intent, letting subordinates take initiative, because battle's chaotic, right? You can't micromanage everything with detailed orders. By the 2000s, this was like a core pillar in the manuals and the leadership schools.
So that's the ideal. That's what's taught. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, especially post 9/11, well, the reality often diverged quite sharply, didn't it?
How so? With combined arms first.
Yeah, with combined arms. Despite the doctrine, the Army's actual ability to do it really declined after the Cold War. The global war on terror, GWOT, just accelerated that.
Because the focus shifted.
Completely. It shifted hard towards counterinsurgency, COAN, stability operations. So you saw this huge growth in light infantry, special operations forces, SOF units, often at the expense of heavy mechanized units. Artillery, air defense, they got deprioritized.
But didn't the 2003 Iraq invasion show effective combined arms, that initial phase?
It did, briefly. A textbook example almost. But then almost immediately the focus snapped back to COAN. So for years in Iraq and Afghanistan, units operated with maybe limited artillery, not much armor, fewer engineers, often from fixed bases, facing an enemy with no air force.
Right, a very different fight.
Totally different. So when the Army started trying to pivot back towards large-scale combat operations, LSCO around 2018, there was this glaring lack of recent practical experience, even among senior officers. And it's deeper than just equipment. It's cultural.
How do you mean cultural?
Well, there's this sort of mythical esteem for the light infantry ranger tab,
Yeah.
almost heroic status. Compared to that, there's this like almost non-existent understanding and valuation of vehicle maintenance or sustainment or engineering roles. They're just not seen as prestigious.
Wow.
Think about it, they even got rid of the dedicated 11M mechanized infantry MOS for a while. That says a lot about what the institution valued or perhaps didn't value during that period.
Wow. Okay, so Doctrine says one thing, culture and operational reality pushed another. What about mission command? Same story.
Pretty much, yeah, very similar. The Army's formal planning process, the military decision-making process, MDMP, it often kind of undercuts mission command in practice.
How does it do that?
Well, MDMP is very thorough, but it's often described as linear, staff-centric, commander-dominated. And it tends to produce these incredibly complex, unwieldy orders. We're talking orders exceeding 50 pages sometimes.
50 pages
Oh.
for a company commander in the field.
Exactly. Imagine trying to digest that, let alone adapt quickly when things are hitting the fan. There's a pretty sharp critique out there that says, basically, we have rebranded centralized control as mission command, then kept doing things the old way.
So paying lip service to the idea.
Kind of, because genuine decentralization, the kind WWII sometimes demanded, needs more than just saying the words. It needs structural change, deep trust, commanders comfortable giving brief, intent-focused orders, units that train together constantly. MDMP, if you're not careful, can just become this bureaucratic thing that stifles initiative.
That really connects back to the cultural point, doesn't it? Fascinating. Okay, let's shift to organizational culture, specifically those elite units born from WWII. The Airborne, the 82nd, the 101st, they became huge symbols, right?
Absolutely iconic.
Embodying courage, initiative, Normandy, Market Garden. Their stories are legendary, baked into Army culture. They still get top people, lots of resources. But here's where it gets really interesting. Does that prestige still match their practical use today?
Well, that's a million-dollar question, isn't it? The prestige is definitely there. But their actual utility, especially for their core mission, large-scale opposed airborne assaults, well, that's steadily declined. Think about it. When was the last major opposed parachute drop by a U.S. airborne division?
World War II.
Pretty much, 1945. Now, the 173rd jumped into Iraq in 2003, which was operationally useful for opening a northern front, but it was entirely unopposed. No enemy fire during the drop itself. It didn't test that core capability against real resistance.
So the argument is?
The argument made by critics is that maintaining 5 active-duty airborne brigades is maybe an anachronism, kept alive more by tradition, the elite brand, recruiting appeal, than by a clear, modern operational need, especially in a fight against a peer competitor.
Because they're light infantry, fundamentally.
Exactly, they're light. Against heavy mechanized forces, without immediate air superiority and rapid ground link-up, they're incredibly vulnerable, almost immobile once they land. Mark DeVore argued they persist largely due to institutional design and this powerful, romanticized airborne heritage, not necessarily proven relevance for today's big wars.
So tradition versus maybe tactical reality. What's the knock-on effect of keeping that focus on the Army's overall balance?
It's had a real cost. This emphasis on light infantry, SOF, airborne, especially during that 2004-2020 period focused on coin. It meant explicitly reducing heavy brigades and deprioritizing artillery, air defense, and armored mobility.
Creating gaps.
Big gaps. For the kind of pure conflict the Army says it needs to be ready for now. And beyond structure, there's that combat-centric culture again. It's like an unintended WWII legacy. It really valorizes the direct combat arms, the infantry, the armor guys.
And undervalues the support roles.
Exactly. Logistics, intel, engineers, civil affairs, they're often seen as secondary. Getting your Ranger tag, commanding a rifle company, that's often viewed as the main path, the real Army experience needed for promotion.
But the irony there is huge, right? WWII itself showed how critical those support functions were.
Massive irony. Think about the top leaders. General Marshall, master organizers, strategist, not a frontline fighter. Eisenhower, coalition manager. Lucius Clay in Germany, administrative genius. Breon Somerville running logistics, absolutely pivotal.
None known for direct combat commands.
Right. Little or no direct combat experience for most of them. But today, in this tactical combat-focused culture, would they make it past lieutenant colonel? Maybe not. They might lack the perceived combat bona fides. It's a weird disconnect from the actual lessons of the war everyone references.
That's a powerful point about what gets valued. It seems like a misunderstanding of what real strategic capability requires.
Okay, let's pivot to strategic lessons. Some learned, maybe some forgotten. Logistics, for instance. WWII forced this incredible logistics system into being. Somerville, the Red Ball Express.
Kept the whole advance moving. Unprecedented scale.
And principles from back then, like standardization, thinking ahead about supply, you still see echoes today, right? Like the NSN system for parts.
Yeah, the National Stock Number System, that standardization is a direct legacy.
And then there's post-conflict governance, civil affairs. Marshall insisted on planning for the occupation during the war, called it mission critical.
And look at the results in Germany, Japan, Italy. Transformative, turning enemies into allies. Huge strategic success.
Okay, so those are vital lessons, but have they stuck?
That's the worrying part. Many argue these critical lessons have become, well, marginalized, lost almost. Take contested logistics.
Meaning logistics under fire. Exactly. Recent wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, logistics were predictable, relatively safe. Uncontested supply lines, safe bases, air superiority. That experience left the Army kind of unprepared for contested logistics in peer conflict.
Where supply convoys are targets.
Big targets. From long-range missiles, drones, air attacks, special forces, supply units often lack the armor, the weapons, the ability to maneuver and protect themselves in that kind of environment. And there's often this cultural divide, too. Logisticians sometimes feel siloed from operational planners, not fully integrated into the maneuver plan from the start.
Even though WWII proved logistics is maneuver, in a way.
Absolutely. If the fuel and ammo don't get there, the tanks stop. Simple as that.
That sounds like a massive vulnerability against a sophisticated enemy. What about civil affairs, that post-conflict planning?
Another area where the lesson seems to have faded. By the time we got to the GWOT, Marshall's emphasis on robust post-conflict planning and capacity was largely lost. The lack of coherent plans, the insufficient resources and institutional capacity for administering post-war Iraq and Afghanistan, it was stark.
And the consequences.
Fueled the insurgency, created governance vacuums, contributed directly to strategic failure. Just a tragic case of institutional amnesia, really, forgetting a lesson paid for dearly in the 1940s.
Which brings us to the wider American way of war idea, maybe. That WWII template.
Yeah, that blueprint. Overwhelming force, decisive victory through big battles, technological superiority, it became almost a reflex. But the problem is, today's Army isn't actually designed for that WWII-style mass mobilization and industrial superiority.
How so?
The all-volunteer force, the AVF, it's professional, yes, but it's too small for a truly massive global conflict like WWII. And it creates this separation between the military and civilian society. Plus, where are the detailed plans for rapidly mobilizing industry and the population, for rapidly promoting officers and NCOs to fill gaps in a high attrition fight?
Things that were crucial in WWII.
Absolutely essential. Imagine lieutenants becoming division staff officers overnight, captains commanding battalions because of casualties and expansion. We need plans for that. And then there's the reliance on technological dominance.
Another WWII inheritance. Better tanks, better planes.
Right. But Iraq and Afghanistan showed us, didn't they? Pouring technology onto the battlefield didn't guarantee the political outcome we wanted. Technical excellence cannot compensate for strategic confusion. We had the best gear, but sometimes lacked the strategy, the understanding of the human terrain. This raises an important question. Are we sometimes too focused on the tech, the tactics, and missing the bigger strategic picture?
And does military education help bridge that gap, PME?
Well, PME has roots in fostering initiative, critical thinking, going back to WWII influences. But the critique is that too often it emphasizes process and doctrinal conformity over intellectual agility. It can end up producing technocratic managers rather than adaptive commanders who can think outside the box in really complex situations. More checklist followers than innovators.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this thread. WWII's legacy is clearly a source of strength, identity, core principles for the Army, but it's also acting as a constraint, isn't it, in some really critical ways.
It's a definite paradox.
It seems the Army today, arguably, might be less proficient in that full-spectrum combined arms fight than it was maybe even during the Cold War peak. Years of Corps N, the cultural shifts, the strategic drift, they've kind of eroded some capabilities, leaving gaps.
I think that's a fair assessment. The critical challenge now isn't to ditch the WWII legacy entirely. That would be foolish. The real task is to intelligently distinguish between the enduring principles, things like initiative, integration, professionalism, adaptability, and the dated practices.
Yeah.
Like maybe the overemphasis on airborne units for missions they rarely do, or the rigid adherence to planning processes like MDMP that can stifle initiative. The goal should be to reclaim the adaptive spirit that really defined the WWII, force their ability to learn, innovate, and change, not just copy structures or romanticize certain elements.
Makes sense.
World War II needs to be, as someone put it, a point of departure, not a point of return. Learn from 1944, absolutely, but learn just as much from what no longer applies. Honor that history through evolution, not just repetition.
A powerful thought to end on.
And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about too. How often do we all kind of romanticize a past success, clinging to its methods, instead of critically learning from it to actually adapt and move forward?